The fifth wall is an invisible wall, and it is a wall of the mind. The fifth wall is the wall that we transcend or we cross or transgress whenever we have an epiphany, a realization, some kind of awakening to whatever fact it might be. Then we have transcended the fifth wall, the wall of our mind. The wall that keeps us trapped, the wall that stretches in a sense between us and epiphany. And it's a wall which it is very, very important to be aware of, because due to its inherently ephemeral nature of being a mental block, it's invisible, and it's something that you have to be aware of in order to not be trapped by or be stumbled up by or hampered by. And apart from merely being aware of this fifth wall, there is another highly important aspect of it, which is important to understand and be aware of if we want to enable ourselves to actually transcend this wall. And that is that it's a wall of fire. And what I mean by that is whenever we're trying to wake up to whatever thing that it might be, at least in an archetypal sense or in a subconscious sense, what that often entails is, or how it is, one way to represent it is that we come to what seems like a gigantic mass of fire that we are reluctant to step into. But what we need to understand about this mass of fire is that it's basically just a thin wall, and right on the other side is awakening, which means that in order to have what we might call an identity restructuring epiphany, you have to be ready to step into the fire. And in order to be ready to, or muster the courage to do that, it enables us to know that it is not a giant mass of fire. It is but a thin wall, and you can step through it, and right on the other side is epiphany. And so we start to see how this wall it really represents this aspect of awakening, which is death and rebirth, right? The death is stepping into the fire, and the rebirth is stepping through the fire onto the higher plane on the other side. And so I really just want to stress this point because it's so important at the beginning of a journey towards awakening, to know this mechanism of the mind, that the reason we hold ourselves back from having epiphanies is really because there's something we're scared of. And what this is really the death and rebirth of our identity, right? In order to have what is an epiphany is an insight so deep that it restructures you, that it restructures your perceptome, it restructures our relationship to reality itself. Like reality changes as a consequence of having an epiphany, but really on a deeper level as a consequence of us changing ourselves, of us going through a death and a rebirth into a higher state of being. And the fifth wall, this wall of fire, is really the thing we have to step into and through. And it becomes much easier to step into it once you understand how thin it actually is. Once you understand that salvation is right on the other side. It's hidden from us. It feels like stepping into fire, but it's really just stepping through into this higher plane or higher state of being on the other side. For what awakening really is a shedding of our old identity, right? We are basically, what awakening is moving through or continually shedding old identities. It is changing ourselves, which means it's a constant saying goodbye to our old or present self in order to gain a higher state of being. And so And so if we're not ready to shed our old identities, old patterns, if we cling to them because we structure our identity around them, then we have made awakening very, very difficult for ourselves. And so there are all these little traps and tricks, and one of them is to understand that this reluctance we have to adopt a higher understanding is really the work of transcending the fifth wall, the wall of our mind, which means stepping into this wall of fire and through it in order to come out in a higher state on the other side. But let's perhaps ask ourselves, right, like, what are our walls of fire? What are the insights or mental states that we are hampered from attaining because we're scared of stepping into the fire? What are some of the patterns, some of the delusions that we carry that we are afraid of facing? What are your walls of fire? For me personally, and I'm guessing I'm not unique in this, I notice often that they are related to or triggered around things or privileges I want to maintain access to, but that I subconsciously feel that I will lose access to if I gain this higher perspective. It might be things like victimhood, for example. When I feel I'm very invested in feeling sorry for myself about something, then I can be reluctant to step into this wall of fire or step through this wall of fire, because it makes me maybe remaining on the, what should we say, the lower state side of the wall of fire, inside the fifth wall, inside the prison of our mind. It will often, and again subconsciously, give us access to certain things that we want to be right about, maybe. For example, that we're a victim, that poor little me, look, you did this to me, now my life is ruined because of whatever external factor. And awakening from that illusion would, of course, be stepping through through the wall of fire and realizing that we're not the victim, that things happen in the world and we are ourselves responsible for what interpretation we make of it, right? That would be a great example of the liberating feeling of stepping through the wall of fire, but also of why we might not want to, right? Because we want to remain right about some aspect that keeps us limited and small. So the point of this video is really to create a state for us in which we realize and see clearly the obstacles to awakening, but also by understanding them clearly, seeing that they are not as insurmountable as we might think. Once we gather the courage to step into that fire and basically fall out on the other side immediately, but in a higher state. To create a frame of mind for ourselves in which we're freer, in which we see the tricks and paradoxes and how to solve them and how to transcend them. Because the more clear a vision we give ourselves in our mind, the more easy it will feel to us, and the more easy it feels to us, the more likely we are to actually successfully transcend whatever it is we need to transcend. But we have to be aware of this trick or this trap, that it feels like death. Awakening feels like death because death is the first part of awakening. But we have to also keep our eyes not only on the wall of fire and the death, but also of the rebirth that comes after the death, right? The coming out on the other side of the wall of fire. It's so important and crucial and central to keep this in mind, That it looks like a mass of fire, but it's really just a thin sheet. And on the other side is some kind of transcendence or salvation. If you'd be willing to share any of your particular or personal walls of fire, well, that'll be pretty great. And furthermore,